Welcome, dear friends, to a heartwarming tale of love, loss, and the unbreakable bonds of family that will leave you believing in the power of miracles. Enjoy the story. Golden autumn leaves swirled around 10-year-old Emily's feet as she bounded down the stairs, her honey-blonde curls bouncing with each light step. Heart fluttering with anticipation, she burst into the sunlit kitchen where her father sat at the worn oak table, reading the morning paper. "Dad, would you like to go with me to the nearby town today to have some fun?" Emily asked breathlessly, her sapphire eyes sparkling with excitement. "We could explore the old fortress, visit the churches, maybe even go on a hike." Robert lowered the newspaper, a slow grin spreading across his rugged, tanned face. He had been working non-stop on the farm for months, his small agricultural business struggling after years of neglect. But seeing the hopeful joy radiating from his daughter's face, Robert knew he had to make time for her. "Of course, sweetheart," he replied eagerly, folding the paper and rising to his feet. "I think a day trip is just what we both need." "All right then, let's get going. Get dressed quickly and we'll hit the road." Emily let out a squeal of pure delight and rushed off to change out of her pajamas, her bare feet pattering against the hardwood floors. Robert chuckled, his heart swelling with love as he watched her scamper away. These father-daughter outings were far too rare these days, but he always strived to make them memorable. As a retired Army major who had served multiple grueling tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, Robert was no stranger to hardship, loss, and the importance of cherishing every moment with loved ones. He had met his first wife, Jen, before joining the military, falling head over heels for her quick wit and fiery spirit. But though deeply in love, Jen had adamantly refused to have children, fearing they might end up orphaned if the unthinkable happened to Robert overseas. Respecting her wishes, but yearning for fatherhood, Robert eventually parted ways with Jen after retiring from the Army, their paths diverging as they sought different futures. Adrift and searching for new purpose, Robert poured his savings into starting a small farm, hoping to put down roots and build a stable life for the family he dreamed of one day having. That's when Lauren entered his life, a humble, hard-working farmhand, with a heart of gold and a smile that lit up even the gloomiest days. With her chestnut hair, sparkling green eyes, and gentle demeanor, Lauren captured Robert's heart from the very first moment. The two fell deeply in love, their connection unshakable as they worked side by side to make the farm thrive. Just a year after meeting, Robert and Lauren tied the knot in a charming country ceremony, surrounded by sunflowers and the well-wishes of their small farming community. Lauren was a vision in a simple ivory gown, glowing with joy as she pledged her love to Robert under a cloudless blue sky. Life with Lauren was pure bliss. She was an excellent homemaker, filling their cozy farmhouse with the mouth-watering scents of freshly baked bread and simmering stews. Her gentle, feminine presence perfectly balanced Robert's sometimes gruff exterior, softening him in ways he had never expected. But as the months passed, a silent heartache grew between them. Lauren tearfully confided that due to a series of abortions in her reckless youth, she was unable to bear children of her own. The news hit them both hard, their dream of creating a family seemingly shattered. Yet Robert refused to let their hopes be crushed. With tenderness and determination, he suggested they adopt a child in need, to pour all their love into a little one who was just as desperate for a family as they were. Lauren readily agreed, her green eyes shining with grateful tears. Enter Emily, a tiny underweight 5-year-old with huge chocolate eyes, a mop of unruly curls, and a guarded expression that spoke of a short lifetime of neglect. Though her birth certificate claimed she had just turned 5, the signs of prolonged malnutrition had stunted her growth, making her appear closer to a malnourished 2- or 3-year-old. But Robert and Lauren saw past the defensive exterior, recognizing the incredible strength and resilience in the bright little girl. They fell in love with Emily instantly, welcoming her into their hearts and home with open arms and unwavering devotion. For 3 blissful years, the family thrived, the farm's success mirroring the joy that filled their household. Robert doted on his precious daughter, teaching her to ride horses, bake pies, and appreciate the simple wonders of country life. Lauren blossomed as a mother, her nurturing spirit helping Emily grow from a timid, withdrawn child into a vibrant, curious girl who excelled in school and made friends easily. But their perfect world shattered one snowy winter morning when Lauren vanished without a trace on her way to an important supplier's meeting in the city. She had left at dawn, carefully navigating the icy roads in their sturdy pickup truck. Dressed smartly in her best wool suit and winter coat, Lauren had kissed a sleeping Robert goodbye, leaving a thermos of coffee and a note expressing her love on the nightstand. But as the hours passed with no word from Lauren, Robert grew increasingly worried. He called her cell phone repeatedly, each unanswered ring ratcheting up his fear. By late afternoon, he knew something was terribly wrong. With a trembling hand, he dialed the police. The news came like a punch to the gut. Lauren's truck had been found submerged in an icy river just a few miles from the meeting site, the driver's side door wrenched open, and Lauren's purse abandoned on the passenger seat. Search and rescue teams combed the frigid waters and surrounding woods for days, but no trace of Lauren was ever found. Robert was devastated, his world crumbling around him as he struggled to process the incomprehensible loss. Grief and despair threatened to consume him, but he knew he had to stay strong for Emily, who was heartbroken and confused by her beloved mother's disappearance. Compounding Robert's anguish were the cruel rumors that began to circulate in town. Whispers that Lauren had deliberately run off with Tony, Robert's slick, city-bred business manager who had vanished the same day, taking a substantial sum of the farm's money with him. Some even suggested the two had been carrying on a sordid affair and had planned the whole disappearance together. Robert refused to give credence to the vicious gossip, clinging to his faith in Lauren's love and loyalty even as doubts gnawed at him late at night. He threw himself into keeping the farm afloat, working long, punishing hours to ensure Emily would always be provided for. Emily, too, stepped up in the face of tragedy, helping with chores around the house and excelling in her studies, despite the gaping hole in their family. At just 8 years old, she seemed to understand that she and her father needed each other more than ever. Now, 2 years later, as the leaves turned brilliant shades of amber and crimson, Robert was determined to give Emily a day of carefree fun and adventure, a respite from the weight of their shared loss. The picturesque tourist town, nestled in the rolling hills just a few hours' drive from their farm, seemed the perfect destination. With its quaint cobblestone streets, towering stone churches, and a sprawling medieval fortress perched atop a hill, the village promised a day of wonder and discovery. As they drove along winding country roads, Emily sat pensively in the passenger seat, her delicate brow furrowed as she watched the autumn-kissed landscape blur past. Robert reached over to pat her knee, his calloused hand gentle. "You doing okay, sweetie?" Emily nodded, managing a small, brave smile. "Yeah, I miss Mom a lot sometimes, especially on trips like this. She would have loved exploring the old buildings with us." Robert swallowed hard, fighting the ache in his throat. "I know, honey. I miss her too, every single day. But we have to believe she's watching over us, smiling down on days like this. She'd want us to embrace joy again, to keep living." Blinking back tears, Emily reached for her father's hand, her small fingers intertwining with his. As they lapsed into poignant silence, the car crested a hill, the picturesque town coming into view. Suddenly, Emily let out a piercing scream, her whole body jolting forward against the seatbelt. "Mom! Dad, stop the car! It's Mom!" Heart thundering, Robert slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as he pulled onto the gravel shoulder. His wide eyes frantically scanned the scene before them, trying to spot what had triggered Emily's outburst. There, sitting serenely on a weathered stone bench outside a towering, centuries-old monastery, was an achingly familiar figure. A woman clad in the simple black and white habit of a nun, her chestnut hair peeking out around the crisp edges of her wimple. "Lauren?" Robert choked out, scarcely daring to believe his eyes. With trembling hands, he threw the car into park and stumbled out onto the sun-warmed gravel, his legs threatening to give out beneath him. Emily was already racing toward the nun, her anguished cries of "Mom! Mom!" echoing through the quiet hills. As the woman turned at the sound of their approach, Robert felt the air leave his lungs in a rush. It was Lauren, 5 years older, her face a bit thinner and more careworn, but undeniably the love of his life. The woman he had mourned and longed for, the other half of his soul that had been ripped away. "Robert, Emily?" Lauren breathed, her voice tremulous with shock and disbelief. She rose on shaking legs, one hand pressed to her heart as if to contain its wild beating. "Mommy!" Emily flew into Lauren's arms, nearly knocking her back onto the bench with the force of her embrace. Sobs racked the little girl's body as she clung to her mother, her face buried in the rough fabric of the habit. Lauren held her daughter fiercely, tears coursing down her cheeks as she rained kisses on Emily's hair, her face, her trembling hands. "My baby," she whispered brokenly. "My sweet, brave girl, I'm so sorry. I'm here now." Robert approached more slowly, drinking in the sight of his wife, hardly daring to believe she was real. When he finally reached her, he engulfed both Lauren and Emily in his strong arms, crushing them to his chest, as if he could absorb them into his very being. "Lauren," he rasped, his voice raw with emotion. How is this possible? What happened to you? We thought—" He trailed off, 1,000 questions clogging his throat. Lauren tilted her tear-streaked face up to his, her emerald eyes shimmering with love and regret. With a shaking hand, she cupped Robert's stubbled cheek, her thumb brushing tenderly over his weathered skin. "Oh, my love," she murmured. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to leave you. There's so much to explain." Over the next few hours, ensconced in the cozy, sunlit kitchen of the monastery, Lauren recounted her incredible tale, her hands wrapped tightly around a steaming mug of fragrant tea. The meeting in the city, she revealed, had been a trap, a sinister ruse orchestrated by Tony to get her alone and vulnerable. Consumed by greed and his secret gambling debts, Tony had been systematically embezzling from the farm for months, siphoning off funds into his own pockets. When Lauren had accidentally stumbled upon his deceit, Tony knew he had to silence her. He had forced her truck off the icy bridge at gunpoint, sending them both plunging into the black, bone-chilling river. "I truly thought I was going to die," Lauren recounted, her voice trembling at the harrowing memory. "But somehow, I managed to free myself from the truck and kick my way to the surface. The current was so strong it swept me downstream for miles before I could drag myself to shore." Half frozen, battered, and barely conscious, Lauren had collapsed on the snowy riverbank, certain her life was at an end. That's when Mother Mary, the kind, white-haired nun now bustling about the kitchen, had found her. "She and the sisters saved my life," Lauren said, smiling tremulously at the elderly nun. "They brought me here, tended my injuries, and nursed me back to health. But the trauma, the shock of it all, it left me with no memory of who I was or where I came from. I could only remember my first name." For 5 long years, Lauren had lived within the sheltering walls of the monastery, slowly regaining her physical strength even as her memories remained frustratingly elusive. Fragments would surface in dreams: a cozy farmhouse, the scent of horses and hay, a deep rumbling laugh, and a pair of striking blue eyes filled with love. But the details slipped away like wisps of smoke each time she awoke, leaving her with an aching sense of loss and longing. "The sisters helped me search missing persons reports and police bulletins," Lauren explained, her fingers absently tracing the delicate floral pattern on her mug. "But we never found anything that seemed to match. The news articles about my disappearance all said I had likely drowned, that the river currents were too strong to have survived. There was no indication that you were still searching for me." Robert's heart clenched painfully at the thought of Lauren, scared and alone, scouring reports for some clue to her identity, while he and Emily grappled with their grief just a few hours away. If only he had widened the search. If only he had trusted his gut feeling that Lauren was still alive. Sensing his distress, Lauren reached across the table to take Robert's hand, her fingers interlacing with his like puzzle pieces reunited. "It's not your fault, my love. Please don't blame yourself. You had every reason to believe I was gone." Swallowing hard, Robert brought their joined hands to his lips, pressing a fervent kiss to Lauren's knuckles. "But why didn't you come home once your memories started coming back? We would have moved heaven and earth to get to you." Lauren's eyes filled with fresh tears, her shoulders slumping under the weight of guilt and regret. Bits and pieces came back slowly, like shards of a shattered mirror. I remembered your face, Emily's smile, the love we shared. But every time I thought about leaving the monastery to find you, I would be gripped by these terrible panic attacks, flashbacks to that night on the bridge. The fear was so paralyzing, so all-consuming. I felt like I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. As desperately as I wanted to come home, I was too afraid to take that leap, to face the trauma head-on. She shook her head, her voice dropping to a pained whisper. I was a coward. I let my fear keep me from you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. No, Robert said fiercely, his free hand coming up to cradle Lauren's face. You are the bravest, strongest person I know. What you went through, it's unimaginable. You survived against all odds. You fought your way back to us. That's not cowardice, that's courage. Emily, who had been listening silently with wide, glistening eyes, suddenly clambered out of her chair and into Lauren's lap, wrapping her thin arms tightly around her mother's neck. I'm just so glad you're alive, Mommy. I missed you every second of every day. Please don't leave us again. Lauren held her daughter close, burying her tear-dampened face in Emily's silky hair. Never again, my sweet girl. I promise. Our family will never be torn apart again. The trio sat in the fading afternoon light, clinging to each other as if afraid to let go, their tears mingling as they absorbed the enormity of their reunion. The road ahead would be long and painful, the wounds left by Lauren's absence not easily healed. But for now, they basked in the miracle of being together, their shattered family whole once more. In the weeks and months that followed, the incredible story of the family's reunion made national headlines, capturing the hearts of people across the country. Tony was eventually apprehended trying to flee to Mexico, the stolen money recovered from various offshore accounts. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison for kidnapping, attempted murder, and embezzlement, his days of greed and deceit finally at an end.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.